All right. Good morning, gentlemen. It's a privilege to be able to share with you this morning. And as I thought about and pondered and kind of prayed about what to share this morning, I kind of came around some themes around the topic of our eyes and looking and gazing and stuff like that. Our eyes are incredibly important. They help us to navigate all of what we deal with in life. I can only imagine what life would be like with little or no sight. For me personally, I've had pretty good eyesight over my life, but over the last 20 or so years, seeing distance wise, it's gotten a little bit fuzzy. And so there's been times where I've tried to wear glasses regularly or contacts regularly, but I have a hard time with seeing stuff in front. So I've just kind of gone without. My kids give me a hard time sometimes when I come up the stairs and I'm squinting at the TV, and they're making fun of me because I'm not be able to see that well. But yeah, so for me, it hasn't been a huge thing. But if I am driving for a longer distance, or if I'm at a sporting event, it just makes things crisper and enables me to be able to enjoy it a lot better. Others of you on the call probably do use glasses or contacts for most of the day so you can see better and navigate life better. Our sight is so important and can be used for things that are tremendously helpful, but we can also use them in ways that are tremendously damaging to us. It's important what we look to and what we look away from. In fact, two, and I would argue three of the aspects of what it means to be all clear from the all clear document directly or indirectly are related to our eyes. It's pretty important. So not viewing or looking at anything inappropriate in a sexual way, or anyone, and not looking at a woman or a person sexually, no second long looks, as we say, and no inappropriate interactions with women face to face or online. Our eyes play a vital role in our addiction, but I want to say this morning that they also play a vital role in our recovery. And it's not just the eyes on our face, but the eyes of our heart and mind as well. Today, I want to talk about fixing your focus, and it matters what you focus on. And so the verses that I'm going to talk from are in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1-4, and what it has to say in this regard, and particularly how it relates to winning the battle against sex addiction. This is what it says from the New Living Translation. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. After all, you have not yet given your lives in your struggle against sin. You know, there's a lot of gold in this passage, and we're going to look at a number of pieces of it as we walk through it this morning. And so first off, the first verse there says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses. Whenever we see a therefore in the Bible, we need to know what it is there for. So Hebrews chapter 12 comes right after Hebrews chapter 11. This chapter is sometimes called the Hall of Faith, or the chapter of faith, which has stories of great men and women of faith in the Bible. Ordinary people, yeah, they still messed up at times, but who did great things for God. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Joseph, Rahab, Gideon, David, Samuel, the prophets. These are some of the many witnesses that Hebrews 12 is referring to in verse 1 when it says, therefore. And in light of what I want to share with you today about getting your eyes or focused fixed, these verses about Moses stood out to me in that chapter as they went through a number of different people and a number of different people of faith. It talks about Moses here, and it says, by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt. He was the son of royalty as Pharaoh's daughter, yet he refused that. He chose to be mistreated instead of enjoying the pleasures of sin. He regarded being disgraced for the sake of Christ as more valuable than the treasures of Egypt. Looks like Moses sacrificed a lot here. Royalty, pleasures of sin, the treasures of Egypt. He would rather suffer than have all of those things. Interesting. Why did he do that? Well, it was because of his eyes, his focus. The next part of this verse says, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered. Why? Because he saw him who is invisible. Moses wasn't focused on the temporal pleasures of Egypt. He was focused on the reward of honoring God that was ahead. He wasn't focused on the angry king of Egypt. He was focused on God and his ability to deliver him and the people of Israel from any earthly king. And God used him greatly. From the parting of the Red Sea to the writing of the Ten Commandments that God gave to him. Striking the rock in the wilderness, water coming out. God did many, many things through Moses. Because Moses, he fixed his eyes of his heart on something way greater than what he could see with his natural eyes. Moses is just one of many of this cloud of witnesses that is referred to here in Hebrews chapter 12. This huge crowd of witnesses are those that have gone before us and have gone through trials and struggles, just like we have. It gives us the imagery of a stadium full of people who have already run their race and are cheering us on as we run ours. This doesn't necessarily mean that they are all watching us from heaven, but they have been through life here on this earth and are examples of how to run this race of faith. This race refers to the race of life that we're in, but we can also apply it to the recovery journey from sexual addiction. As you will recall, the first line of our check-in says, I'm a much loved child of God. Don't ever forget your core identity. Don't ever forget who God has made you to be when you've accepted Christ in your life. Second part, on my journey to freedom. It's a journey. It's a race, but it's a journey. And to what? Freedom. By the help of God and our brothers here. In the recovery race or journey that you are moving from sexual addiction, there is a goal to reach. Overcoming sexual addiction and being free from its bondage and tyranny. So on this journey or this race, the next part of Hebrews 12:1 says, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. Most of you have probably watched races in your life, short ones, long ones. Last night, I looked up the men's world record holder in the 10,000 meters, the 10K, and found it was held by Joshua, I don't know if I'll say his name right, Cheptegei of Uganda in 26 minutes back in 2020. And as I thought about that, this guy can run 10K 5 minutes faster than I can run 5K, which doesn't say a whole lot, but that's pretty incredible. 26 minutes to run 10 kilometers. Now, as I thought about this, can you imagine this guy coming in to the starting blocks with a backpack on? What about tinted swim goggles? You know, those are really cool on the swimmers. They wear them. What about a nice leather jacket? A Ugandan flag wrapped around his waist. Can you imagine him coming up to the starting box with swimming flippers on? You're like, dude, what in the world are you thinking? You can't run like that. He could have come to the race with all of those things on, but if he had any chance of winning, he would have shed every single one of them before he stepped into the blocks. Why? Because they would have hindered him from being his best. He would be stumbling all over the place. He would have lost his focus, and he would have failed miserably in trying to be the world's fastest 10,000 meter runner. I think you probably know where this is going. In your journey in life and recovery from sexual addiction, are there things that are weighing you down, slowing you down, tripping you up? Are you hiding some questionable material? Are you holding on to things that you need to let go of? Is there a backpack of regret and shame weighing you down that you haven't given to Jesus? Are there leather jackets that are hiding the truth of how you're really doing, leaving little lies that say, just a little look? It's not really a relapse. It's not a big deal. Nobody's going to know. You see, these things slow you down. This verse says, throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Trim the fat. Lay siege to areas of your recovery that are slowing you down. Say no to the sin that wants to rob you of your freedom. Evaluate what's hindering you, slowing you down. Get rid of it. Then what it says, and let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. How are we to run? With endurance. That means at times we're going to grow weary and want to quit. There are times when we will face challenges along the way, times where we'll have to deal with fellow runners along the way, but we keep going. We don't quit. We push through. We endure through those times where our feelings fight against our values. We resist the temptation to give up, and by God's grace and strength, we run with endurance the race he has marked out for us. Jesus said, I have come that you might have life and life to the full. And he calls us to follow him by the power of the Holy Spirit inside of us. And how do we run this race? Verse 2 says, we do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. I love that. Did you catch that about our eyes? What do we do with our eyes? We keep them on Jesus. The NIV says, fixing our eyes at Jesus, not glancing at, but fixing them. It's one thing when sometimes you might be watching, you might be FaceTiming somebody, and they have their phone that they're holding on to, and it kind of can go all over the place, and the focus is all around. But then you have someone who has their phone fixed, and it's easier to focus on that person and have that communication with them. There's many other examples we could use of fixing our eyes. Could talk about someone who is hunting and holding the gun by themselves, or versus having it in a stand where it's not moving at all. This passage says we need to fix our eyes on Jesus, and when we do, what do we see? He's a champion. He's conquered every sin that easily entangles, everything that trips us up, every temptation that we ever face, every burden that weighs us down. He's conquered it all. And he is the one that initiated our relationship with him. He initiated the invitation to forgive us of all our sins and have a relationship with him. And he is the perfecter. So he's the author. He starts it, but he's also the perfecter of our faith. He is working on us and working with us as we partner with him and allowing him to make us more like himself. We fix our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates our faith and who perfects it. And when we and what we also see when we fix our eyes on him is we get to see what Jesus focused on. And it says, because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. And now he is seated at the place of honor beside God's throne. What was the joy awaiting Jesus? Well, there's many things, but his victory over sin, over Satan, over death, over hell, the rescuing of human beings from death and being spiritually separated from God, the joy of sitting at the place of honor at the right hand of the Father, of setting humanity free from the power and penalty of sin. He was focused on the joy of resurrection on the other side of the cross, of preparing a place in heaven for all those who place their trust in him, to enjoy the splendor of heaven for all eternity. Jesus looked past the agony of the cross, and he fixed his focus on the joy set before him. I think that's amazing. I think that was a major part for Jesus to be able to go through the cross, because he could see what was on the other side. As difficult and as painful and as awful and as horrifying as the cross was, he did it because he could see what that would result in. He could see what that suffering would produce. And so he fixed his joy, his focus on the joy set before him. Now he's seated at the right hand of God in all of his glory. As we fix our focus on Jesus, what are we called to consider? Well, it says in verse 3, think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. After all, you have not yet given your lives in your struggle against sin. In Jesus' battle with our sin, he suffered horrendously at the hands of sinful people, but he also suffered horrendously from carrying the weight of our sin. There was the physical suffering that he endured on the cross, but then there's the emotional, mental, and spiritual suffering of what it meant to take on the sin of the world. I think about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane and how he wrestled with his Father. He didn't want to die on the cross. In fact, he pleaded with his Father twice to let this cup pass from him. And in that agony of him resisting, and the agony of him of submitting to his Father's will, it talks about how his blood came through his pores because he resisted and fought like that. And then he resisted to the point of shedding his blood, where he could have said no. He could have said, I'm out of here. I don't want to go through this. I don't want to have to deal with this. But he didn't. He had his eyes fixed on his Father. He had his eyes fixed on the joy set before him. And he endured that. And so he's able to help us with what we wrestle with. He shed his blood for our freedom from sexual addiction and every other possible sin. He endured and battled and said no to giving in. And yes, Father, not my will, but yours be done. Why? To save us from our sin, but also so that we would not grow weary and give up. Jesus fixed his focus on his Father, on the joy that was set before him and the joy he would have at redeeming you and I and setting us free. And he overwhelmingly conquered. And because of that, we can overwhelmingly conquer through him. Yes, the battle to overcome sexual sin is hard. And when you're tempted to focus on how hard it is, when you're tempted to let your eyes wander and look at other women in an inappropriate way, or to look up or try to view sexually explicit material, or to fantasize with the eyes of your heart or mind, or to not look for the joy set before you by enduring the battle like Jesus did in order to overcome, can I strongly encourage you to adjust your focus, not just to adjust it, to fix your focus on Jesus. What are your eyes focusing on today? What are you seeing with your physical eyes and the eyes of your heart? Here are some ways that we can practically fix our eyes on Jesus. I want to encourage you to remember that he loves you unconditionally. Unconditionally. No matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done, no matter how hard you've struggled, his love for you is not based on your performance. It's based on the finished work of Christ on the cross. And he died for you. He loves you unconditionally. Secondly, remember that you are a much loved child of his. Your identity is not a sex addict. As we talk about this aspect, even in our check-in, we are a much loved child of God. That is our core identity. And we're dealing with sexual addiction. We are working to overcome the sexual addiction. But first and foremost, we are much loved children of God. So when it comes to looking at Jesus, remember that you have an identity of a much loved child of God. Third, remember that he overcame so that you and I could overcome and walk in freedom. In Romans chapter 8, verses 37, it says, the previous verses talk about how God is for us and not against us, and who should bring any charge against God's elect. And it says that in Romans 8:37, it says, in all of these things, we are more than conquerors, or we overwhelmingly conquer through him who loved us. I want you to remember as you think about what it means to look to Jesus, remembering you're looking at champion. You're looking at the one who overcame so that you could overcome. And because he did overcome, you and I are more than conquerors through him. I want you to also remember that Jesus has experienced every temptation just as we have, yet he didn't sin. Sometimes that's hard to think about. Jesus was tempted sexually. Yeah, he was. And yet he didn't sin, yet he walked in freedom. But he understands our temptation. He understands our weakness. In Hebrews 4:15, it talks about that he understands what we go through. And then it says, but come boldly to my throne of grace because I have mercy for you in your time of need. When's our time of need? It's most likely when we're doing our worst. And it's at that moment that God says, come boldly to my throne of grace. Come confidently. Why? Because you're my child, and have mercy and grace for you. I know oftentimes when we think about looking to Jesus, there can be, man, I can't look at Jesus. I'm too ashamed to look at Jesus. I've messed up so poorly. And at that moment, God is saying, come boldly to my throne of grace to receive mercy and grace in your time of need. God wants to heal us of that shame. He wants to forgive us. He wants to give us mercy and grace. And so when we think about looking to Jesus, we can look at a Father who has got his arms open wide, saying, come, I got mercy and grace for you. I put this one in here, look to the mountains, or whatever reminds you where your help comes from. David talked about in Psalm 121, I look to the mountains, from where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. There might be something that you have in life that can remind you of looking to Jesus. For David, he looked at the mountains and he was reminded, wow, my help comes from the Lord. When you're facing temptation, when you're alone, I want to encourage you to look to God. And that might be something like the mountains. It might be his creation. It might be something that you have that reminds you of who he is and reminds you that that's where your help comes from. David looked to the mountains to remind him of who God was. I want to encourage you to do the same. What is that for you? What is that symbol for you? Gaze upon his beauty. Psalm 27:5, David says, one thing I ask, one thing do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord, to gaze upon him in his temple. One thing he asked, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. What does that look like? As I pondered that a little bit, what does it look like to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord? I want to encourage you to ask God to reveal to you his beauty. It could be from the mountains. It could be from creation. It could be in your family. It could be you might even have a picture of Jesus in the Bible. It could be him around the throne. It could be John's picture of him in Revelation chapter 1, where he saw Jesus, the incredible one that was there. But David took time to gaze with the eyes of his heart and probably with his own eyes on the beauty of the Lord. I want to encourage you to set aside time to meditate on who he is and what he's done. 7, remember your why, your reasons why you want to overcome. One of the reasons many of you have is so that you can walk with integrity, walk with purity, walk in a relationship with God that is good. Remember the reasons why you're doing that. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Fix your eyes on the reasons why he wants to help you overcome. And if you have other reasons that come there, you can add those reasons there. Spend time with him. There's many ways to do this. It's not just one way or just the other way. There's many ways that you can spend time with Jesus. Talking with him in his word, worshiping him, listening to him, memorizing his promises and truths from his word. Just spending time in solitude and silence with him. Fix your eyes on him by spending time with him. Contemplate the cross, what he endured so that you could be set free from this addiction. Bring it to mind when you're tempted. You may have a picture of a cross with you. You may, even in your own mind, have a picture of Jesus on the cross as a reminder to what he has done for you. And one of the things that I do with people at times is just ask, God, would you reveal to this person how much you love them? And fairly often people come with a picture of the cross or of Christ on the cross as a reminder to them how much they love them. There's things that we can fantasize in our minds. I want to encourage you to have a picture of Jesus, have a picture of the cross, that when you're stressed, when you're struggling, you can bring that picture to your mind and look upon Jesus. Submit yourself and your eyes to him as instruments of righteousness and holiness to him. Romans 6 talks about how we're dead to sin, and it goes into parts of our body. And don't use the parts of your body as instruments of sin, but submit the parts of your body as instruments of righteousness to God. This is something that we can practically do, where we just, Jesus, I surrender my eyes, the eyes of my heart to you as instruments of righteousness and holiness to you, holiness to him. And we can ask him to help us only look at things that are honoring and righteous to him. But we actually render and reckon our eyes to be instruments of righteousness, so that we don't look on things that are not good. When you're tempted, look away from the sin. Turn and look to Jesus, thanking him that he is there to empower you to say no to the temptation and yes to him. That's a powerful thing. First thing you can do is turn to the one who has all power, the one who lives inside of you. Look to him and thank him that he's there helping you. Start your day, end your day by focusing on him, and do it throughout the day as well. But again, be intentional about looking to Jesus. There's many other things that we can distract us through the day, but this is something we can always come to Jesus to recenter ourselves and refocus ourselves on him. I would also encourage you, what does looking to Jesus mean? Telling somebody else what you're learning about him. When we look at Jesus and when we share what we see of Jesus with other people, it can solidify things in our own lives. 14, ask him to help you keep your eyes on him. This is something that you can do. And you can ask him, God, would you help me to see what you want to see? Help me to fix my eyes and my thoughts on you. The last thing I said, there's many other ways that you can fix your eyes on Jesus. And I just want to encourage us, myself included, to fix the focus on Jesus. And as we do that, God is going to help us and work with us in great ways to remind us who he is, what he's done, and how he wants us to overcome, because he overcame. Blessings on you, and I hope that is an encouragement for you today.